My name is Bill Massolio. I first came to Charlotte County in 1960. My parents had bought a home on Harbor Boulevard, which was then one of the main drags, and I spent that first year here during Hurricane Donna, which was quite an experience. Not very many people in Charlotte County when that occurred, thank goodness. We had to evacuate. We tried to get over to what was then St. Charles, was the only shelter, and we couldn't even get there because the bridge had washed out that would get you on Olean. So we ended up at an acquaintance house and spent the night there, and then went back to our house, and luckily there wasn't a lot of damage, and General Development was very good about coming out and repairing it. At any rate, I went to what was then Charlotte High Junior High, which was on Cooper Street, which is now Charlotte High School. That was quite an experience coming from Chicago and then going to a school in Charlotte County was like a different culture. We were on split sessions. We only went a half a day because it was so overcrowded because of the influx of people. A whole lot of things were different. They had no air conditioning. That was bad, especially in the early months. And the whole system was different. So it took some getting used to. But at the end of that year, just about the end of that school year, my parents had to move back to Chicago. One of our family members was injured in a car accident, so we had to go back. And then we would come down to Charlotte County on vacation because we still had the home. 1968, I transferred from college in Illinois to University of South Florida, became a full-time resident in Charlotte County at that time. Was married in 1969. My wife Linda was also brought up in Charlotte County, went to Charlotte High School. We were in a private business at that time. We were subcontractor for General Development. And then eventually in the early 1980s, I went into education, became a teacher and a coach at Charlotte High School. I was there in Charlotte County for 22 years as an educator, either at that site or at the district level. And then eventually I transferred to Sarasota County where I live now. But I saw the growth of Charlotte County boom, obviously, during that time. We had the time Charlotte High School, then they built Lemon Bay High School, then Port Charlotte High School. A big influx of people. We lived back off of Pelham, where now the mall is. And that was a big thing. I remember very vividly that opening up that day. Big crowd, probably the biggest crowd they've ever had there. So I saw that, the booming of Charlotte County. Was involved with the building of Treasure Lanes, which is on 41. Was involved with the owner of that building to build that, and that's been quite a success, obviously, since then. Obviously involved with Charlotte High School a lot. My 3 children all went there. My son is a teacher there and has been for the last 26 years. He's the head basketball coach there. My grandson, my 2 grandsons, one graduated from there, the other one is going there now. So we have a large and a long legacy with Charlotte High School, so I've been involved with that and seen that school obviously change dramatically, especially after Charlie, to what it is now, which is like a state-of-the-art high school. It's fantastic. Back in those days, the 3-story building was built, I think, in 1927, and it was a pretty rough building to be in. If you were teaching there, the floors were so warped that you could actually stand at one end and roll a ball down toward the other end, and it would go down into this valley and come up, and then it would come back to you. You didn't even have to go get it. That's how warped the floors were in some places, and it creaked, and you know, it didn't surprise me that it didn't survive Charlie, but to rebuild it the way it looked originally has been a real nice thing. Obviously, the growth has been the major thing, and the influx of people and the change. And I just came down 41, and to see how crowded that is, I remember when it was 2-lane, and that was a big deal. Back then, during the summer, we used to have this joke that you could sit around and count Cadillacs go by. That was about, because business was pretty slow during the summer. That's all changed now, obviously, to what it is now. And it's been a great place to live and to raise kids. Well, you know, I was here during Hurricane Donna, and thank goodness there weren't many people here then. Just to give you the idea, we lived on Harbor Boulevard near Edgewater, and I had a paper route back then. It was the Daily Herald, I think it was called. It was delivered once a week. I had all my customers were between what is now Port Charlotte Beach and 41. And then think of, go down Edgewater to the right, there's now a bridge. There was no bridge there then, it was a canal. And go to the left, there was a bridge there in the main canal. There was no bridge there then. But everybody in that area that I just spoke to, I had as a customer, and guess how many customers I had? 23 customers, that was it. That's all that lived in that area. And that was, I think, fortuitous because that storm was over Charlotte County for almost a full day. And in those days, most people had the flat tar paper roofs. Our roof was ripped off. The tar paper was all ripped off, and we had jealousy windows. And it was raining so hard, terrazzo floors, everybody had terrazzo floors. It was raining so hard during that storm that water was coming in the jealousy windows. And we were mopping it up luckily on terrazzo floors. Well, that lasted the whole day. Started at about 9 in the morning. The eye came over sometime late before it got dark. And then we got the backside of the storm. And the only people on that block were ourselves, and we had a neighbor who was two houses down. And we had to set up a prior code that if we were in trouble, we were going to flash. We had spotlights. We were going to flash to them. Of course, power was out. During that time, what happened was the tar paper in our roof, it picked it up and ripped it off, threw it in the canal behind the house. And we noticed a crack up in the beam of the cathedral ceiling. So we got very worried that our roof was going to go. We signaled to him, because at the time I was there with my mother, my younger brother, and my grandfather. My father was still in Chicago. And he was good enough to come over and gather us up, and we kind of had a human chain over to his house during the middle of the storm, because he didn't feel like our house was safe. At 2 in the morning, he had a shortwave radio, and he picked up that there was going to be a tidal surge hitting the west coast of Florida. We didn't know much about the geography then, but supposedly the wave was going to be 25 to 30 feet high. And he said, I don't know if we're going to get inundated with water because we live really close to the beach. So he said, let's go. Let's take off. So we left in the middle of the night with 2 cars going down Harbor Boulevard, which was 2-lane, and it was flooded. You couldn't hardly see where you could go. We crossed 41. We're going to go to St. Charles, as I mentioned earlier, and we turned right on Olean, and that bridge, the water was over the bridge. So he got out of the car. I'll never forget. His name was Bill Ehrenfeld. He later was a county commissioner in Charlotte County. He worked for General Development at that time. And he walked toward the bridge, and everybody yelled at him, don't do that because you don't even know if the bridge is there. Got back in the car. We deemed it wasn't safe to go over that bridge. So he knew somebody in that area. We went to their house. They let us stay there for the night. Next day went back, and as I said, General Development was really great about being out the next day and fixing it up. The damage I remember was there was a drive-in theater, which was at the beginning, right across from Harbor Nissan is now. There's a little shopping center there with Publix. That was a drive-in theater, and I think it was owned by Vic Desquin. I think he owned it. It was one of the few entertainment spots in Charlotte County at the time. That blew over, okay? The telephone tower on Harbor and 41, that blew over. There were some homes that lost a lot. I don't think there were any fatalities in Charlotte County. There were further south in Fort Myers and Naples, but it was a pretty harrowing experience, and we didn't have the kind of, I don't know, instant coverage you have now. We had 3 channels that all came out of Fort Myers, and we lost TV. We had antennas. We didn't have cable. So they came around on a truck with a loudspeaker announcing the hurricane was coming and what to do. But we didn't have any of the preparations that you have now. Nobody thought of boarding up their windows or anything. It was just like, okay. We were all from up north. We didn't understand hurricanes. So we were lucky to survive that. If there would have been a lot more people here, I fear that would have been a lot more disastrous. But there weren't, and that really was good. During Charley, I actually live in Northport now, which used to be called Northport Charlotte, by the way, back then. And I live in Northport now, and it was ironic that I watched Charley on TV, and I never lost reception. I never lost power, and it was only 7 miles to the south, right, coming up the Peace River. Parts of my family, that night I ended up with over 20 people in my house who'd lost the use of their homes because they lived in Port Charlotte. I went and got my mother, who was living in assisted living over on Olean. I went and got her. It was like a war zone as you came into Charlotte County that afternoon. You know, as soon as the storm was past, we hopped in our cars and drove down here. No electricity, people wandering around, kind of dazed. A lot of damage, obviously. And here I was living in Northport. I think I lost a screen or something. That was it. It was ironic. And like I say, for the next several weeks, we had people staying with us who were waiting for their homes to be repaired and that. So dramatically different, even though Charley wasn't on the scale of Donna as far as how high it was, but because there were more people here and because of the nature of how it came up and spun off some tornadoes and things, probably caused more damage and more loss of life. Ironically, during my time in over 40 years now living in this area, I've only had to witness those two storms and then Irma, which was the only time I ever went to a shelter, which actually kind of petered out before it got here, so we were kind of lucky with that. So during that time, we've been pretty lucky, I think, fortunate in not having that kind of impact from storms like some areas like Louisiana on the Gulf Coast up that way have had, Texas. But other than that, Charlotte County, I always say is a great place because you can be as active as you want to be, you can be as laid back as you want to be. There's a lot more to do than there was when I was, as a kid growing up here. I mean, it's hard to believe. We used to run and walk over to Charlotte High School from Harbor Boulevard, believe it or not, to get into the gym because the gym was kind of open all the time. So it was the only gym around. So we would, that's a lot, I couldn't do that today, but back then we would do it kind of normally. There weren't a lot of things, the drive-in theater. If you wanted to go to a movie, you had to go to Fort Myers or Sarasota. The beaches, of course, were great. The fishing was great. And you know, you could fish offshore and catch fish all the time. The beaches, of course, as I said already, were great. You go to Inglewood and drive right up on the beach back in those days. That's all changed. Some of it for the better, some of it maybe for the worse. I don't know. The schools have improved a great deal since I went to them back then. A lot more to do, a lot more facilities, but with that comes congestion, more traffic, more issues. Punta Gorda, I think like downtown Punta Gorda now is really great, I think. And I hate to say this, but in some ways Charley was the best thing ever happened to Punta Gorda because it infused some money into areas that were starving for that. You know, new businesses, new hotels. Lashley Park is fantastic, it's great. None of that was here before Charley in the way it is now, so that's all great. Charlotte High School, like I said, I have a connection to, always have had, always will. Great tradition, one of the most supported, community-supported schools I've ever seen. And I've worked in education for I just retired from the college level. I've never seen a school, a high school, so supported by its community as Charlotte High School. And I can tell you that when I visit other schools, and I've worked at other schools in Southwest Florida, everybody knows that, that this community supports its high school as, like, they travel well. Whenever they go someplace, they have a bigger crowd than sometimes the home crowd. You know, it's like runs in their blood. It really is wonderful to see. And having coached there, I was lucky because the first year I coached baseball, my team went to the Final Four. We played in the state championship. We lost, but you know, it was, I mean, we were treated like royalty. We came back, people were taking us out to dinner. They built us a brand new baseball field. It was something else the community got behind, and just ironically, my son's basketball team just made the Final Four. Unfortunately lost last night up there, but again, the way the community came out and supported that, and still supporting it, it's been really, it's very unique. I don't think people understand that. If you go to other schools in the area, they have very little support. Even though they may be bigger, have more resources, they just don't have the kind of support Charlotte High School has. So the alumni, ironically, a lot of the staff at Charlotte High School are Charlotte alumni. It's a unique situation that way too. You don't see that at a lot of schools. I think their head coaching staff, out of their 16 major sports, 12 of them are former Charlotte High School graduates. You never see that in another school. So it carries on the legacy. And that's been the most impressive thing. The hardest thing for me to understand is why Port Charlotte, in terms of governance, has never incorporated. I just think for some reason, they've lost out on maybe some benefits they could have had if they would have incorporated versus staying unincorporated. And it always seemed like, hey, for some reason they didn't get what they deserved, and you don't have the kind of zoning regulations maybe you'd like and so forth, and but it's still a great place. And my mother bought, the reason we ended up in Port Charlotte was my mother, we lived in Chicago, outside of Chicago, and she thought we came down here on a vacation a couple times to Miami, and she really liked Florida. So without my father knowing it, she saw an ad in Life magazine, was $10 down, $10 a month for a lot. And she went with her own money that she earned, she bought 3 lots. And when we came down to Florida in 1957 on a vacation to Miami, she surprised my father by saying, guess what, we own property here in Florida. Like, what? Yeah, but it's over on the West Coast. Really? We took, on the way home, we went Tamiami Trail, which was then 2-lane, came up, visited, and the main display for general development was on Easy Street, which was a bunch of little model homes with a big lighthouse that wasn't functional. And they looked at it and they said, gee, take us out and show us where our lots are. And I remember the guy taking us out, and we came to the end of the road where there was a canal, and he looked out at the other side and he said, do you see those 3 palm trees over there? That's your lots. And it was like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean that's our lots? How do we get to our lots? You can't right now. You have to wait till they build the bridges. So in that reason, they decided the next year when they came down to buy a home that was being built on Harbor Boulevard as a spec house. And they still kept the 3 lots, which ironically I ended up getting one, buying one and building a house on one of those 3 lots. And I still have a cousin who lives on one of those 3 lots now. So that's how we ended up here in 5960. Just because my mom decided, hey, sounds like a good deal, $10 down, $10 a month. I think it was $600 for a lot, or $500, something like that. And she saved up that money to do that, so that's how we ended up here.